was a very inexperienced teacher. I had a very challenging little boy that was on my caseload, and people had a lot to say about what he couldn't do. His records were full of statements about his difficulties, his challenges, what he couldn't do, what he wouldn't do. And it was really career-changing for me when my administrator met me and asked me, "Hey, you excited about being this little boy's teacher?" And I must have looked horrified. The fear must have shown. And he said, "Let me just tell you, you are gonna love this kid."
Johnny Cash Miss Nelson loved that song. But she's on.
He is fantastic. He is so neat. He can do this. He can play this video game. I saw him at his house. He was able to, make a snack for his sibling. He made a card house that would knock your socks off. You know what? He loves caterpillars and butterflies and horses. And he went on and on about this little boy's abilities and gifts and strengths. And I was blown away, and I thought, who is he talking about? I learned right then and there how important it is to frame my work in a different way. Inclusion in the early days was interpreted to mean that we are thinking about and considering the needs of students with disabilities, and we're bringing them into our general ed classrooms. Today, many researchers and practitioners see inclusion with what I call the big I, or the capital I, inclusion for everybody. When we're including students with autism and without autism, we are thinking about how do we make our schools responsive to every learner that walks in the door? How do we really appreciate, identify, and honor the individuality and the uniqueness that our learners bring? And how do we provide an appropriately challenging education to all? One of the things that is important when considering what is an inclusive school is school culture. What does the school look like, and what does it feel like? Is it democratic? Do all students feel welcome, including kids who have ethnic differences, racial differences, differences in sexual orientation, gender differences, students with and without disabilities? So that kind of conversation is ongoing.
A leader's role in an inclusive school is to develop the vision, align everything to that vision, stay the course, and not negotiate the vision. The negotiation is the process in which you're going to get to that outcome, but the process isn't about negotiating whether or not you're going to be inclusive or not. That, to me, is non-negotiable. When you get into those more difficult situations, that you're still problem solving around the vision, that you're not negotiating that vision. One of the commitments that we're trying to make is be really honest and really look at the mirror. Do we have segregated spaces that only kids with disabilities are accessing, or only kids with English language learners are accessing? And if so, why? And let's try to remove that. Are all kids accessing and riding the same bus that they would just if they didn't have an identification? If we have buses that aren't accessible, can we purchase the ramps to make them accessible? So those are all conversations that are taking place to align everything that we're doing to the vision that is out there about truly being, again, an integrated, socially just school for all kids.
Teacher beliefs or teacher habits of mind are something that I've always been interested in, because sometimes these are the intangibles of educating kids. For example, if you are not someone who sees yourself as both a teacher and a learner, it might be really hard to have a student with autism because there's probably a lot to learn if this is your first student. So that's one of the habits of mind that I talk to teachers about. Really see yourself as a teacher and as a learner. Ask questions like, what can I learn from this student? What is the student trying to show me? What are the complexities that the student brings to the classroom? What are some of the gifts the student brings to the classroom? These are particularly important questions when you're dealing with a child who is very challenging, either with physical needs or behaviors. Because too often for those students, we're asking the question, why is he doing that? Or how do we get him to stop? And sometimes it's more helpful to say, what does that behavior mean? Can I learn from it? Another habit of mind that I think is important is to watch your language. And what I mean by that is, I think personally that language drives practice. And so sometimes we see students described in ways that are not only unflattering, but may actually be not very helpful. For example, is a student active or hyperactive? Are they steadfast or stubborn? Are they perseverating or are they regulating? Is this person a runner or does he just need breaks?
Let's check. Let's check it.
Even to phrase challenges in a positive way. For example, instead of saying he can't even sit for 10 minutes, it may be more helpful to say he can sit for 7 minutes. And it's not to say that you don't talk about challenges, but we always want to be thinking about, how am I thinking about this particular learner? Am I looking for the complexity in a child, or am I making assumptions that will not be helpful?
60. What are they asking?
Plants.
Got it. 60 plants. Nice one, too.
Students with autism are some of the most deceiving kids on the planet. And when I say that, I mean that so many students do not have reliable communication, do not have a way to express what they know. We don't know what they know. And in these situations, it is our job to teach to their perceived ability, to make what my colleague Ann Donnellan calls the least dangerous assumption. The least dangerous assumption is this student with significant disabilities is learning. This student with significant disabilities can profit from a rigorous educational experience. This student with disabilities is enjoying himself and benefiting from these interactions with peers. The most dangerous assumption is, why bother? Oftentimes we're asking the question, what do students without disabilities, learn in an inclusive school? What do they get out of it? And it's the wrong question. What do all students get out of diversity in their schooling environment?
I learned that Nick can remember everybody's birthday, and I was like, wow, I can't even do that.
He'll be like reminding you when it's your birthday. He's like, isn't your birthday like this day and so? And I didn't know because he could type without looking, and I got pretty impressed.
Because I cannot type without looking at the keyboard.
I think inclusion is important for all kids because it allows students with disabilities more opportunities to be where they belong, to be included in all activities, in all aspects of the day. And I think it's also good for students without disabilities. It gives them an opportunity to learn how to work with different types of students, to learn how to embrace differences and be less critical, to learn how to find the strengths in other students and build friendships based on those strengths, authentic friendships.
One of the challenges that I think was here before I came was that inclusion was actually setting kids apart. So one kid had a special seat and one kid had a weighted snake. And the attitude of the staff was, well, if one kid's gonna have a weighted snake, then we should just put 5 in the classroom. And that attitude got resistance from, well, what do you mean I have to do this for everybody? And so I think one of the struggles that we've been able to overcome is that inclusion ideas work really well for everybody. And that when you make those choices available to kids in the class to sit with a weighted snake around their neck or sit on a bumpy chair or sit in a cushion, that those don't become distractions and problems and more work. They become part of the classroom climate, and all of that can support learning, not detract from it.
Start with your group. Why did you choose to make Barney for your group? How do you feel it fits for the idea of being pop art?
Our group picked Barney because
I think kids with autism in particular need to have inclusive experiences for the same reason really all learners need to have those opportunities, is so that they too have the opportunity to be able to interact with people that they're going to be interacting with through the rest of their lives. And I believe that the schools have a central role and function to make sure that kids are having those opportunities, because if not here, when? And if not by us, by who?
Chloe's actually teaching me some sign language because she knows sign language. I mean, I knew some, but she's helping me out. I talk to her in sign language sometimes. I feel really connected to Chloe. I never thought I'd be this close to like a special ed student before, but I love her.
One piece that I think is so important when thinking about inclusion is that this is a process. And I think sometimes where we get into trouble around inclusive ed is that we think that it's going to be instant. Most of the kids that I have supported in my career, quite frankly, the first week of school hasn't always looked great. Sometimes the first month of school is a struggle. We know that for kids with needs that are pretty significant, that it is going to be a question of over, under, around, or through. Find a way or make a way. We have to use a lot of different strategies, and a strategy that works for one student with autism may not work for another student with autism. So it's a lot of creativity and problem solving. Oftentimes, teachers find, however, that when they make a change for a student with autism, it profits lots of other kids.